Two men, a borrowed typewriter, a knock on a door surrounded by sandbags. That is how the organization responsible for keeping world peace got started. And if you stay until the end, you will never think about bold beginnings the same way again. Picture this. World War II has just ended. 60 million people are dead. Cities across Europe and Asia are in rubble. And the leaders of the world are asking one very urgent question. How do we make sure this never happens again? The answer they come up with is breathtaking in its ambition. They will build something the world has never had before, a permanent gathering place for every nation on Earth, a table where countries talk rather than fight. They call it the United Nations. But here is what the history books rarely tell you. When it is time to actually set the whole thing up, the man in charge turns to his assistant and says, "I'll handle the high diplomacy. You take on the rest. Find an office and a secretary and get this thing started." His assistant, a young Welsh diplomat named David Owen, does exactly that. He borrows a typewriter from the Foreign Office and a secretary from the War Office. Then, together in a taxi, they head for Church House in Westminster and knock on the door. That is how the United Nations begins. Two men and a borrowed typewriter. Church House in Westminster is, in normal times, the head office of the Church of England. The building is still encased in sandbags and barbed wire from the war and guarded by a detachment of Royal Marines. And yet, on January 17, 1946, something extraordinary happens inside those sandbag walls. Representatives of the countries that defeated Nazism and Japanese militarism sit down together for the very first time at one negotiating table as permanent members of the world's new security organization. The United States, Great Britain, France, China, the Soviet Union, joined by Brazil, Egypt, Mexico, Poland, Australia, and the Netherlands. The atmosphere is formal yet cautious. Delegates are aware they are making history, but they are also conscious of the big differences that already exist among the major powers. Think about what it takes to sit at that table. Many of these men have lived through the war themselves. Many of the UN's earliest staff bear the visible wounds of war, a limp, a scar, a burn, and here they are, choosing to try anyway. British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin had said he wanted the meetings held in a venue bathed in prayer, reflecting both the pain of the war and the hope for the future. And so the world's most powerful new body meets for the first time in a house of God, surrounded by sandbags, armed with a borrowed typewriter, and an enormous amount of hope. Here's the number that will stop you cold. When the United Nations first gathered in London that January, 51 member nations sent delegates, the largest international gathering of its kind the world had ever seen. But today, the United Nations has 193 member nations, nearly every country on the face of the earth. All of them connected to that first knock on a sandbag-covered door in Westminster. And just 2 weeks after the Security Council's first meeting, the General Assembly passes its very first resolution calling for the peaceful use of atomic energy and the elimination of weapons capable of mass destruction. They had just survived the most destructive war in human history, and their very first act as a united world is to say, never again. Here is what this means for your life right now. Every international peacekeeping mission, every global health response, every refugee is protected, every ceasefire negotiated, every child vaccinated in a country recovering from conflict. All of it traces back to that moment in January 1946, when a group of exhausted, scarred, hopeful human beings decided that talking was better than fighting. The founders of the United Nations were not untouched by reality. They had seen war. And they knew that peace, justice, and equality are the most courageous, the most practical, the most necessary pursuits of all. They did not wait until conditions were perfect. They started with what they had: a bombed city, a borrowed typewriter, and the belief that the world could do better. And I want you to sit with that for just a moment. Because here is something I believe with everything in me. Every one of those delegates sitting around that first table in London carried a story, a name, a family, a hometown that may or may not still exist after the war. Stories that their children and grandchildren desperately needed to hear. And this is what I want to ask you today in a way that only you can answer. Do you know your family's stories? The moments of courage that nobody wrote down? The times someone in your family chose hope over fear or kept going when everything said stop? Those stories are not just history. They are the foundation that the people who come after you will build their lives on. Have you ever thought about writing them down? Not as a book, not perfectly, just as a gift. Because here is what breaks my heart a little. Every single day, irreplaceable stories disappear because the only person who remembered them is gone. You are the keeper of something no library holds, something no search engine can find. The story of your people, told in your voice, is a treasure that exists nowhere else in the world.